Hi everyone, good Monday morning and welcome to GoLocal Live. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in with the latest in news here as Rhode Island enters phase 2 of reopening the economy. And just 1 week from today, Twin River is looking to reopen with an invitation-only style reopening in Lincoln and Tiverton. And we have Marc Crisafullli, Executive Vice President of Twin River Worldwide Holdings, joining to tell us everything about it. So Marc, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Kate. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we appreciate your taking the time. Obviously, big news at the end of last week. The preliminary announcement from the Department of Lottery saying it was going to happen June 8th, and then a very comprehensive release from Twin River about how this is going to look for sort of stage 1. So if you will, Marc, walk us through that process. This was a collaborative effort with state officials, lottery officials, to say how can we get the casino up and running and under what parameters. So talk with us a little bit as we're here about that discussion process.
Sure. So it was, it was a great process. It really started actually back in April with us, the Department of Revenue, the Department of Lottery, Department of Health, everyone getting together to try and figure out how it is that we can safely reopen. Kate, how important this revenue stream is to the state of Rhode Island. It's important to our company too, and we have 2,500 employees here. So, back in April, we started working through what it could look like. How could a reopening happen? And then as you follow the science throughout April and May, circumstances kind of changed, and we looked at certain things being more important, other things being less important. And ultimately, we came to a plan that made sense. And with the state's progress getting to phase 2 now starting today, everyone felt it was time to safely open next week.
And let's talk a little bit about that. You talk about that process. Obviously, other states throughout the country are wrestling with this as well, especially in the gaming world. How much outside of Rhode Island did you look at? Again, different casinos are looking at different reopening times, but everyone's facing the same challenges.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. There are about 250 casinos around the country right now that are open, and we looked at every plan around the country and even around the world. You look at Macau, which was the first casinos in the world to reopen after being closed. So we carefully studied them along with the division of the lottery that was very interested in understanding how everyone else proceeded. But ultimately, it's been pretty clear that the state of Rhode Island has taken its own path, that it's been more careful and a little more thoughtful than some of the other locations. And so we followed that same exact process.
So for folks who might not have seen the release, Marc, let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts. Obviously just VLTs at this point, different spacing, different cleaning requirements. And of course, the number one is by invitation only. Was that, let's start with that. Was that really a way to control the size and the reopening process?
Yeah, there are two really important elements about the invitation only and why we did that. The first was to make sure we carefully control crowds. What we didn't want to have happen was have a huge line of people out the door wanting to come, potentially not socially distancing, actually doing exactly what we don't want to happen right now. The second important aspect of it, though, however, was knowing who's in our casino when.
Exactly. Yep.
And if they're a member of the Players Club, then we have all of their information. We know which day they're there, and we can do contact tracing should that be necessary. That's been a critical initiative by the state of Rhode Island to try and make sure contact tracing is available, and this is how we would enable that function in our facilities.
And obviously, this is a new world order that we're living in. How often do you imagine having conversations? Is it going to be on a daily basis, sort of how did things go? As you, again, are reopening under a whole new set of parameters?
We expect to be having the conversations daily. We've been having the conversations daily already. Things change every single day. Something changes. We get some new information out of the CDC or the State Department of Health or all these other, places that are giving information and feedback. So we're talking daily. We expect we'll continue to talk daily. Our first round of invitations will go out. Those invitations will allow people to come for 14 days. Okay. Anytime, as many times as I want within 14 days. Within a couple of days after opening, if everything's on track with the state, then we're going to issue another round of invitations, and we'll keep doing it that way. And it'll be the same process with how it is that we start to enhance amenities, bring in some other things. We're working on a plan actually right now with the state on the sports book. We haven't announced that yet, so we're hoping to try and create an opportunity for people to come in even without an invitation just to go deal with the sports book. We're also working on interesting ways with IGT and William Hill about allowing people to register for the mobile app just by going to the parking lot without actually coming into the property. So those are things that we look to try and finalize this week, but every day it's changing, Kate.
So let's talk a little bit. I mean, Lincoln, Tiverton, the footprints are rather large, obviously, a large scale project with the table games, and I'll get to that in a minute. But one of the things is capacity, Mark. Obviously, talking about inviting folks for those first rounds, then additional invitations. But when we're talking about social distancing and having folks be sure to be 6 feet apart, let's talk a little bit about that. Is there a point that, is there a new number that's going to be the maximum number of patrons as we go through the process? Is that a daily, weekly discussion?
It is. So, but where we're starting is extremely cautious and carefully, right? So we'll be conservative. People shouldn't draw into how many people show up on the first day and look at that as an indicator of whether it's successful or not. We are intentionally compressing the numbers. We have plenty of space. You know how large our facilities are. If you just look at the fire code areas only for the gaming floors, not for the rest of the facilities, we'll still be below 25% capacity from fire code, even in those limited areas. So we're confident we should pretty quickly have room to grow and still respect all the social distancing. But, in our conversations with the state, we all just agreed it was best to just go a little bit slower, a little more cautiously. We can always add more people.
And let's talk about that. I mean, I'm sure folks are saying, when are there going to be table games again? When can the general public go? Do you anticipate that this will be sort of in lockstep of the announcements we hear from the governor looking at phase 3? But again, this is a June 8th opening, a little in between that 2 and 3, obviously. Are you going to set your own time frame, or is it going to really be dictated by the state?
Well, ultimately, it will be dictated by the state, but in close partnership and collaboration with us, we have to look at it objectively and see what really happens. I don't think we'll be on the same schedule that everyone else is, phase 2, phase 3, that kind of, because we can also do things where, like, if you look at restaurants, for example, they're 50% capacity, we're below 25% capacity. So it might be a very easy, natural thing to say, okay, we're just going to go to a third capacity now, right? Or we're going to launch a little more invitations. It's going to evolve. I think there will be lots of small incremental steps as opposed to big sea changes. Tables will be a big decision. There are other casinos around the country that have tables open already, some with the barriers, some not. We have a casino in Mississippi that has tables open right now, and it's working really well. We've limited it to just 3 people per table.
And so you talk about having that experience. What are going to be the dictating factors here to say, okay, we've seen it be perfectly fine in Mississippi. What's going to determine when that decision's made here?
In close consultation with our regulators and the Department of Health.
So speaking of Mississippi, Twin River Worldwide Holdings just recently made some announcements of more acquisitions. Let's talk a little bit about that. Folks here obviously know of Twin River and Lincoln and Tiverton, but more of a footprint. So talk about that expansion, Mark.
Oh, sure. So we had previously announced several months ago that we were already acquiring a second casino in Mississippi and one in Kansas City. So we expect those to close by the end of June, maybe into July. But we were really fortunate to be able to bring 3 new casinos under contract during the whole COVID crisis, actually, at incredibly attractive pricing. The prices were really low, and it's a great opportunity for us to come out of this stronger than ever. We're acquiring the Bally's Atlantic City Casino right on the middle of the boardwalk in Atlantic City. We're getting the Eldorado Shreveport in Louisiana and Mont Bleu in Lake Tahoe. So there are 3 additional casinos plus the 2 we're already doing. That's 5 we're adding to our portfolio of 7. And, by this time next year, or maybe even a little bit earlier, we're going to have 12 casinos in 8 states.
Okay. And so you're bullish on in-person gaming. Clearly the industry is as well. Do you think that this is going to significantly change the course of in-person gaming? You talk about, obviously, the sportsbook, mobile sports betting. This was discussed throughout this spring as well, obviously, when the contract extension was on the table. But let's talk a little bit about this. Are you hearing from folks they still want to come back to casinos?
Absolutely. And the demand numbers have been off the charts. In Mississippi, just as one example, but this has played out in a number of different places. We opened last Thursday. We opened at 50% of capacity, limited hours, limited amenities, all the same things, except that they had tables as well. The numbers in Mississippi through 10 days now are anywhere between 30 and 150% better than the same period last year. So people want to play. They want to come out. They want the experience. I hear what you're talking about in terms of whether in-person gaming will diminish. We don't believe it will. We think there will be additional items to add around interactive and other online gaming, but the core player still wants the experience, and we're pretty confident that's going to remain for the foreseeable future.
Obviously, last spring, Mark, before we finish up here, talk about where things are with the contract extension. Twin River and IGT coming to an agreement, but of course, at the review of the General Assembly, which, as we've seen, is not currently in. Let's talk a little bit about that. Conversations with legislators, of course, was already basically the ball was rolling for them to review. Where do things stand?
Yeah, so, legislation was introduced by the House and Senate leadership back in February. In March, we had our hearings before House Finance and Senate Finance. There were a number of suggestions that were made about ways to improve the deal and, improve some of the terms. And so I think all of those things are in the process of being worked through, and we're going to see if there's an opportunity for it to be heard in the next month or so during the session. I'm getting a lot of very positive feedback here, as is IGT, because now more than ever, people want the economic development benefits of this deal. We have a shovel-ready project to do a massive expansion in Lincoln to really invest in our property. We need the development jobs. We need the construction jobs. People want to see that go forward. And now we've proven how important this revenue source is to the state of Rhode Island. We need to figure out a way to come out of this, enhancing our ability to compete with Massachusetts and Connecticut. So, it's really difficult to predict what's going to happen right now in this environment. It's not even clear yet if the state's going to do a full budget or a partial budget or how that's going to play out. But we remain optimistic about the fact that the IGT Twin River economic development deal remains a priority for the state.
And let's talk about that. Again, the legislation introduced, the hearings had, as well as you mentioned, of course, budget is the #1 priority. Is there a possibility not taking up this, if it's not taking up this session, what would that mean for the casino?
It would be disappointing if that happened, but it would just mean business as usual under the current terms and agreements. And, we would operate the way it is. Unfortunately, we probably wouldn't be able to expand our casino right now, but we would operate as best we could and do everything we did as if there were no deal. And then if someone wanted to try and revisit in the future, maybe that would happen, maybe it wouldn't, I'm not sure. But we would go on. Either way, we're going to get our facility open as quickly as we can, as smartly as we can, and go forward and do whatever we can to compete in the region.
So last question before we let you go, Mark. Obviously, folks know that next Monday is only open to Rewards Club's members. How does one become a Reward Club member?
Oh, you can go online and fill out the information, and it's very easy. And then when you come into the facility, you get a chance. They'll verify your ID, and they'll give you your card. So we can do that for the time being. We would encourage people to sign up for future rounds, but the first grouping of the invitation is all set. We're fortunate. We have a terrific, loyal base within our Players Club here already, and unfortunately, we're only able to invite 10% of the players to start. So we have a long way to go with already existing members, but we think it would be smart for people to try and sign up online and join. And, you never know how this is going to develop and change over the coming weeks.
Well, we appreciate your taking the time to Skype in with us here. Again, the big announcement last week with a number of details. We'll be sure to put that link up, and you went over a few of them as well. But hopefully, moving forward, as things reopen in the state, including Twin River, we'll have the opportunity to talk with you soon. So Marc Crisafullli, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me, Kate.
Okay, and thank you for watching us here on live. Be sure to see us at noontime. Dr. Michael Fine, former Director of Health, will be live with GoLocal's Josh Fenton. I'm Kate Nagel. We'll see you soon.